This is Molly with SIFF TV, and I'm sitting with Irv Drasnin, the director of The Revolutionary, which, for people that haven't seen the film, do you want to go ahead and give a little brief intro about what it is about?
Well, it's about an American, the only American to take part in the Maoist era of the 1950s, both in the mass movements and in the Cultural Revolution, events which China has all but written out of its own history books.
Sidney Rittenberg, who was an extremely important character or person in this revolution. Why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, one of the things, there are many things extraordinary about Sidney Rittenberg, who is 90 years old and who speaks with a wit and humor that belies his experience and what he had to endure in China, which included 2 jail terms, totaling 16 years, all of it in solitary confinement. He knew Mao, he knew Zhou Enlai, he knew China's leaders starting at the guerrilla base in Yan'an. He was the only American to join the Chinese Communist Party. And yet, the same Mao, who hailed him as an international communist fighter, also condemned him as an imperialist spy. He was innocent, but it didn't keep him out of prison for 16 years. But Rittenberg lived his life with the courage of his convictions. And what is compelling about this film is he also had the courage to re-examine those convictions and reassess them and critically talk about them and to do it on camera.
What is most important to you about bringing this film to audiences? What would you want them to walk away with?
2 key points. Number 1 is that these events are still important in China. If you read today's New York Times, Chen, the blind lawyer who has just come to this country, who we've given sanctuary to, has an op-ed piece in today's New York Times in which he cites both the mass movements of the 1950s and the Cultural Revolution. There is that context that is still very, very important in China, that is still part of the political conversation in China. Number 2 is, I think, the limits of foreign influence on countries whose culture and politics and history are much different from our own. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or China. There's a limit to what influence we can have in those countries, as Sidney found it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sidney could not be a better example of that.
That's right.
I'm sitting with Tamar Chirai, the composer, and Rasit Celikezer, the director for John, which is a very, very moving story, but we'll have you describe it first. So why don't you tell us a bit about the film?
Film hakkında konuşalım. Filmimiz aile üzerine bir dram. Anne olmak, baba olmak ve çocuk kalabilmek üzerine bir.
And in the story, there is a couple who cannot have a child, so they go to these other means to get a child. That is sort of a bit of a scheme, if you will. Do you feel like the film is set in Istanbul? Is there a stigma about adoption or infertility? Is that why they have to hide what they're doing?
Anladın değil mi?
Çocuk edinebilme. Dün de sormuşlardı ya, benzer. Çok ekstrem bir örnek bizdeki. Yani hep böyle olacağı durumu yok. Dünkü cevaptan hatırlarsan. Yani bir işçi ailesi ve yine küçük insanların muhafazakar toplum tutunmaya çalışmaları hikayesi.
What would you like audiences to take away from this film when they watch it?
Yani işte aile ise anne, baba ya da bir çocuksa izleyen kendilerini, şu anki durumlarını sorgulatabilecek bir pozisyon elde etmişsek ne mutlu bize. Hani onlar da kendi hayatlarındaki bahsettiğim şeyleri olabilme dertlerini kendileriyle konuşabilmeleri.
I am sitting with the composer, Tamar Chirai, of John, and the director, Rasit Celikezer. This is a film about a couple that is dealing with infertility and the inability to have a child, how they deal with that, and really what it means to be a parent. So we're looking forward to seeing it. Thank you so much for sitting with us and talking.